But I'm joined today by Sir Robert Buckland MP, Conservative Member of Parliament for South Swindon, but more importantly, former Justice Secretary. Now, I think most folk sitting at home will be scratching their heads, or maybe, please don't turn off, because we're going to explain it. What does the government launching a judicial review, what does it actually mean?
OK, well, the government is saying that, unlike the view of the chair of the inquiry, Lady Hallett, who wants to see all the material that she considers potentially relevant to the issues in the inquiry, that they take the view that a lot of the items are just irrelevant. They're going to be of no help to anybody whatsoever. And more than that, they potentially create a chilling effect. Remember that phrase from way back, the chilling effect, on the way that ministers and officials might work in future. In other words, is there a safe space for ministers and civil servants to get on with their job, to be frank with each other, but in a way that can avoid, frankly, further, sort of a retreat further into the undergrowth if all this material is now going to be capable of disclosure in this way. That's what this argument is about, it seems to me. The government don't want to comply with the decision of the judge. Her decision, though, as chair of the inquiry under the Act of Parliament that creates inquiries, is absolutely exclusive. It's her discretion, her decision. The only way they can challenge it is by asking another judge to look at it to see whether or not it is unreasonable. It's so unreasonable as to be clearly wrong. Now, that seems to be a high hurdle to cross, and I do hope that instead of this turf war, we get a solution as soon as possible, because, as you said at the top of the package, we need to get on with this.
Well, isn't that the problem? That the very act of the government doing this, in effect, kicks the can further down the road, and judicial review is not going to be next Thursday, is it? It's going to be some months down the road. But here's my real question to you, Robert Buckland. I mean, whilst I understand, and I do understand, why the first lockdown came in, we'd seen horrendous scenes from Milano, we'd no idea what was coming.
Absolutely right.
We had historical fear of 1919, the so-called Spanish flu. Well, I got to tell you, after that, I was deeply sceptical about what the government was doing. And interestingly, people like Professor Carol Sikora, who were warning and saying, actually, these successive lockdowns will cause greater physical and mental harm to the nation than the virus ever can. At no point has anybody in government apologised to us, apologised for taking away our liberties in a way that has never happened before in the history of this country, apologised for adding huge amounts to the national debt, much of it, or too much of it, swallowed up in fraud. At no point has anybody apologised for the tens of thousands of people who were undiagnosed with cancer. I mean, you see where I'm coming from on this.
I do.
There is considerable... No, by the way, it wasn't easy for any governing party in any country.
That's the point. And
I will put that in mitigation. But nobody has apologised to us at any point. And I just wonder whether people sitting at home, listening to this in the car, I just wonder whether they don't say to themselves, surely the decision as to what is unambiguously irrelevant should be a decision taken by Lady Hallett and not by a government that, let's be frank, has a vested interest in protecting its reputation.
Well, my view is that I think it'd be far better to leave it to Lady Hallett to be the ultimate arbiter. That's what the law says. She's independent of government. She's been put in that position because of her reputation as an excellent judge and as a lawyer of standing. I think we should be trusting her to make these decisions. And I'm sorry to see that we've got to a position where a legal challenge is being launched.
So you regret the government's action?
Well, I can't speak for them, but I would have sought...
I didn't ask you to.
I would have sought a compromise here. Surely there must be a better way of dealing with this information, to hand it over, to allow independent lawyers to redact it, to edit it, to make sure that relevant items are before the inquiry, and that then when the inquiry publishes its findings, we all can see what is clearly relevant, and that decision's been made by an independent person. I regret hugely that we've ended up in this turf war, which I think is unnecessary.
I suppose one thing you could say is, given the ongoing battle between the civil service and the government, which, I find it extraordinary that civil servants now do not want to carry out government policy from an elected government with a clear majority, and, we'll debate that another day, perhaps. But maybe there's a fear that if a lot of information is given to Lady Hallett that is deeply personal to Boris Johnson, which clearly some of this will be, the fear of it leaking?
Well, that is a very serious matter for the inquiry's own discipline and their own ability to handle the evidence. And I think that would undermine confidence and trust in the inquiry if there were such leaks to happen. So I would have thought they'd be on their guard not to allow that to happen. But I mean, as I gather, as I see from Boris Johnson's team in the last few days, he's saying, look, hand it all over. You know, they can make a decision as to what's relevant or not. I'm more than happy for my papers and my diary to go over. Now, I think that's probably the best course here.
Yeah,
I think
most people are going to conclude that the government, rightly or wrongly, fairly or unfairly, this looks shifty. This looks slippery. And it's how things look, isn't it, in politics?
It is. I mean, to be fair, they will have had legal advice about this, I have no doubt. Now, as a former law officer myself, I know that legal advice would be sought, would be obtained, it would have to take, would be considered carefully.
What lawyer ever tells you not to take action?
Well, I've been a government lawyer for a long time, Nigel. I know that it's important to protect the space within which government operates. If we do end up in a situation where everything you do and say is potentially disclosable to a third party, you're going to drive it all underground. We're going to have, semaphore code? You know, we need to know for the future. You know, when we look back at the history of this time, we need a record of who made what decision, when, and in what circumstances. The danger with all of this now is that, you know, our future generations are going to look back and say, well, how the hell did they come to these decisions? We don't know. We've got no paper trail.
It's not minuted and it's not... Yeah,
exactly.
No, I buy that. I buy that point. But do you... I mean, come on, you know, you were there.
Yeah.
We do... I mean, we are owed an apology, aren't we?
Nigel, I think that it's far better that we acknowledge the fact that no government is perfect. I certainly don't sit here and say we got all the calls right. I'm sure that in the light of hindsight, there are calls we would have made differently. And I don't think any of us sitting around that table wanted to lock the country up. I can remember thinking, my God, you know, this in a peacetime democracy, a liberal democracy like Britain, we're really going to do this? And I think all of us had that collective...
But we kept on doing it.
We did it.
We kept on doing it.
On the basis of the information we had. You know, I'm a great believer.
Now, you're telling me we followed the science, but...
Well, I didn't use that phrase. I never liked that phrase. I never liked that phrase, that slavish sort of... follow the evidence, yes, and on balance, try and make the best decision in the circumstances. You know, I've made thousands of decisions as a minister, Nigel. I wouldn't say they were all the best or the most perfect decisions.
Sure.
But I made decisions in the circumstances on the evidence that I had at the time, in good faith. And that's as much as you can expect from any minister.
What the Matt Hancock leaks, and we might deplore the manner in which all of Matt Hancock's WhatsApp messages came into the public domain. But they did. And the most damning thing in that was he was making decisions, or urging decisions, that certainly weren't following the science. And I'm talking here in particular about quarantine periods for people who've been abroad, and they thought by the way that I'd gone into the open after 13 days and 12 hours, and could they lock me up? Well, I'm irrelevant to this. It's quite funny, but I have got Pub Hooligan now as my Twitter handle. But actually what was happening here, he was wanting decisions to be made to protect the government's reputation rather than dealing actually with genuine health risks from COVID. And it's all there in black and white, and it's frankly why he has to leave politics. There is no way back. Having seen the way Hancock behaved and the decisions he made, some of which were based purely for selfish, political, reputational reasons, why the hell should I trust this government?
Well, look, individuals will be motivated by different things. And I don't think it's fair to say, therefore, the collective view of the government was that we were trying to sort of, you know, slip and slide our way through this because of political expediency. I can tell you, none of this was politically expedient. I mean, the idea that we wanted to lock up the country, you know, stop the economy and end up having to subsidise, you know, jobs and livelihoods was clearly bonkers. I mean, we didn't want to do any of this.
No, but that was then and this is now. And my point is, I'll repeat the point, that what those Hancock revelations showed us is that things were being done to protect his political reputation. You know, even when Whitty and Vallance are saying 5 days or 7 days is fine, no, we must stick to 14 because I've said it already. I mean, it's just wrong. It's just wrong. And my question was not about the difficulty of decisions that government faced at the time, but this looks like a cover-up. It looks like it.
It might do. I think to give the government absolute fair airtime, I don't think it is. I think it's traditional caution by lawyers and others in government who don't want to set difficult precedents for the future. I get all of that. But in the light of this particular inquiry, its central importance, the issues that it's dealing with, all the issues that you've mentioned, I think it is as plain as a pikestaff, or should be, to anybody in government, that the need to cooperate as early and as swiftly as possible and as openly as possible is essential if we are to avoid either the perception of cover-up or indeed the reality. Bearing in mind, all the things that we know now, then I think it is incumbent upon government to cooperate in the fullest possible way with Lady Hallett and her team and to reach a compromise on these issues, which I'm sure is possible.